the edge that I marked off down at the bottom. These should be slightly different, ever so slightly different. In this case, it's a little more than 1/8 of an inch difference on a tiny card like this. If you were to do something even smaller, it wouldn't matter. You wouldn't need 2 cards. You could just use 1. That is, if you were scaling down to a tiny composition. These are still mostly squarish rectangles. So I'm going to start with the 12 by 15. I have an X that marks the center of this. And I'm going to use another proportional tool that you have in your kit to decide how large my hole is going to be in my viewfinder. What is the opening going to be? And how do I make that true and proportional? We're going to use an adjustable compass. I'm going to adjust this compass every time to an opening that is just about or exactly 1 inch. And to do that, I'll get a little more contrast here by turning over my card, turning this up, and letting you see that I'm putting both the pencil lead end and the steel point of the compass right up against the line so that I know I've got just about 1 inch. It doesn't matter if it's 1 inch or a little bit more or a little bit less. That's going to give me a circle of a radius of 2. And I think for this card, I'm going to do a little less than that. I'm going to set that radius to 3/4 of an inch. All right there, 3/4 of an inch. All right. So this compass stays adjustable. If you use the one with the pencil in it, it'll move around. This, you have to turn the knob to make it go. What I'm going to do is put the steel point of the compass in the paper, the card, and I'm going to rotate the card around that edge. I've now got a circle that's subdivided by 2 diagonal lines. You can see that the short end of the composition has a shorter arc on the circle, and the long end, representing the longest dimension of your paper, has a longer arc of the circle, and all 4 arcs make a complete circle. So the next thing I need to do now is draw a line between where the arc of the circle makes contact with the diagonal that goes through it. This should be a horizontal line. These should be horizontal, completely horizontal, but they're too hard to measure because this is done proportionally and they're micro inches. So there is one line, and I want to make sure that I eyeball it at this point pretty tightly. This one looks just a tiny bit off because I didn't put my compass point right in the middle. I can see that now. So I'm going to possibly have to fudge a little, not too bad. Okay, I want to make sure. These lines, even though they're small, do have width. And you're already fudging a little bit with the very tiny sub 1/16 of an inch kind of line. I'm going to turn this over, roughly make sure that my ruler isn't tipped diagonally. It should be parallel to the edge of the card. Make sure I've lined these up pretty closely and draw the length. And now where the last arc of the circle intersects my line, I can already see it's a little tiny bit off. And there's where some of that gets lost. That is my viewfinder window. That is proportional. to 12 by 15 inch sheet of Bristol board. And it's the viewfinder that I'm going to use if I have a border of 1 inch around my paper. So the next stage takes a little bit of a little extra tool. And that extra tool is your craft knife. Craft knife right out of the box, never been used. Make sure that the knurled top of the craft knife is nice and tight and that you are in a good position to work. I'm going to take my little steel edge here again. If you've got only this big floppy ruler, you can do it too, but I generally turn it over. The cork side keeps it from flipping, but this side allows me to see my line a little more easily. And because I have lighting sources here that cast shadows, I want to make sure I'm going to put my knife tip in this and cut through the card. This knife is super sharp. And I'm cutting out the little window that is my view into the space that I'm going to be drawing on. My view of the foliage that I look at. I'm going to take this viewfinder with me and I'm going to use it to spot a nice area of composition. You take that out, you pop out your viewfinder. Alrighty, this is not as hard as I thought it was. Okay, so my blade is a little dull. Stand by for a new blade. That one doesn't look great. So you've got fresh blades in your kit. I'm gonna do this over. I'm gonna run it down that edge. Okay, now I feel I'm through. Takes a little precision. It works best with these fine point craft knives. And I'm gonna run it down here, and I'm pressing hard with my tool, and I want to keep my ruler from slipping. So this takes concentration and skill, and you want to be able to press down on a safe, flat surface. So always work on the back of your notebook. Never cut into a surface you ever expect to put paper on to draw. So I have a very generous window that I'm popping out of my viewfinder, and now I have a viewfinder that will allow me to view a subject, and I can move this viewfinder close to my subject or away from my subject, but the viewfinder really needs to be held, and you look through it with one eye or one eye closed. You can use two eyes, but it's very hard to see, and you move it close to your face. It fills the frame with lots of information. Farther away from your face, it starts cropping and cropping down until you reach your arm's length, and that's the maximum number of things that you could see through your viewfinder when it's still in your hand. So this viewfinder fits this piece of paper. I'm ready to go outside, view my view, and keep working. That's the scale-up version. That's probably the easiest version to use, and so we're going to stick with that one for this assignment. And here's the page that shows the scaling up of a 3x5 card, method 2. And lastly, I'd like you to make an adjustable viewfinder. And an adjustable viewfinder allows you to determine the dimensions of your view. They're not prefixed. In other words, this viewfinder